up. How'd you like to have that in your bedroom every morning? And all right. Pretty good, Crystal. Where is that man? You must be very relaxed. Yeah. So the title of this talk was given to me, and I didn't quite know what it meant. It says, Staging a Graceful Exit, so I guess I'm done. I really don't believe that staging a graceful exit is how we exit life. My comment is that there is no staging of a graceful exit. I will give you the line I learned at the Experiment in International Living when I was going overseas in 1961 to live with a family in Brazil. Expect the unexpected. I will begin with a story called Alan's story. Alan was a 48-year-old Harvard graduate who dedicated his life to teaching mathematics in elementary schools and high schools in Vermont. At the age of 48, he was diagnosed with metastatic carcinoma of the prostate. He was told he had less than 6 months to live. He died 2 years later. He ran 14 miles every day barefoot. He was a vegetarian. He was a Buddhist. He was a kind and wonderful man. He wrote me a very unusual poem just before he died, for he was my brother-in-law and one of my best friends. Paul took the goat cart. This is called the goat cart. Paul took the goat cart and the goat. Where did he go to? He got the goat to pull the goat cart up the hill. At the top of the hill, Paul put the goat in the cart and said, "Go kart." The goat cart went. At the bottom of the hill, Paul kissed the goat cart good night. Good night, good goat. God is a goat. He takes us up the hill and rides down at our side and sleeps in our arms at night. But he is not calmly. This journey we make from birth to exit is a remarkable and wonderful experience for many. For others, it is filled with tragedy and hurt and difficulty. Each of us comes to this from a different place, for we are beautifully and blissfully unique. Alan had one thing that drove him, he said, during his dying year. The 3 C's of Martin Luther King: courage, compassion, and creativity. Those held him up so amazingly well. He never took a pain pill of any kind throughout this painful experience. He used his Buddhist faith, his running, his diet, his meditations twice a day. That's how he got there. So this is a process. First of all, you have to have the awakening. You got to understand that you're heading there. Well, I see a lot of gray hair around the room, so I don't think I have to press that point too much further. But in the awakening, there is a sweetness, but there's also a shaking fear. The precepts of Martin Luther King: courage, compassion, and especially creativity, will help us to understand the awakening, to open ourselves to it, and to allow it to begin to flow through us. A major part of the awakening leads you gently to a personal inventory. We have all erred in our lives, and we will err many times more longst we're here. So we need to take an inventory of that, much as the people in AA do in one of their major steps to recovery. Look at that inventory. Think about the people you may have harmed, the people you may have offended, the things that you may have done that were not right. You list the inventory. You write it down. You face it. And then you begin this remarkable process of the honey-do list. And you take them one by one, starting with the easiest ones and working to the hardest ones until you have completed the list. And then, in the completion of the list, you will have done what I call the apologias, and incidentally, your doctor here can't spell, so you have to correct that. Apologia comes from the Greek meaning of real apology. Heartfelt, thought through, from the heart. I'm sorry. I did you wrong. I hope that in your heart you can find forgiveness, for I need that before I leave this world. The forgiveness has to come within yourself. It doesn't come from someone else. It must come from within you, an understanding of yourself. When you forgive yourself, you can then forgive those who have sinned against you, if that's what you want to call it. You have to forgive others, and you have to forgive yourself if you're going to move on to have what you hope to be a peaceful exit. This is one of the most underused sets of rules in medicine. You have to understand this, not just as doctors, but as patients. Forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. Then comes the sweetmeat, the reconciliations, the families who never spoke, who come together and find joy in each other's presence because they have found forgiveness. The reconciliations with yourself and your community, your nation, your people. Then comes the desire of many to find a peaceful end in the arms of love. And of all the things that I've asked patients as they have come towards this process, what can I really do to help you at this time in your life? The heartfelt ones say, help me have a peaceful end in the arms of people that I love, surrounded by caregivers I can respect. I'll end this little short session with something called Ray's story. This is back 20 years ago, where I had my office, where Jesper now has his office. There was a private room, and there was a bed there. And it faces towards Peaked Mountain, and the sun comes up over that mountain in the morning. Ray and his wife were in the room, along with Bess Richardson, one of our most wonderful, caring, competent, loving nurses. Isla, Ray's wife, was holding his hand. Bess held a cold cloth on Ray's head. I was massaging his feet, as I was assigned to do. And the sun slowly popped up over Peaked Mountain, and a beam of light shone directly onto Ray's face. And on the metal fire escape that coursed past the window of that room, a spring robin came, sat on the steps, and sang its heart out. And as it's finished, it flew away into the sun. How great a death. That's the goal where we're heading. I want to leave this open so you may ask me questions at this part. I didn't want to belabor you or blather on. I just wanted to put down the sort of the guidelines. Do you have any questions?
To think about.
Don't be shy. Yes, ma'am. State your name, please.
Jean Albee. How would you approach a family or a person who has shown no desire to talk about what's coming and find out their wishes and their desires and to talk to the family as well?
Surely there aren't people out there like that. What a nasty question. How do you start? Anyone want to help her? I have some ideas, but I'd like to know what yours would be. What would you do in this situation that Jean brings up? Come on, we're all family here. Talk. Yes, ma'am. State your name, please.
Michelle Gursky?
Yes,
You
ma'am.
just bring it up?
It's as simple as that. You nailed it. You bring it up, and 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 sometimes it never comes up. And you don't feel guilty about it. You tried, you did your best, and they felt they needed to protect themselves from that. So it wasn't time to do it, and they pass on, and we don't know what they had in there. It happens. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Got to get up on my tiptoes.
Diana, I wonder if they could find one little thing that they connect on, and it may be gardening, or it may be music, or it may be painting, or something even less romantic. And if you could just start that, just completely removed from the real issue. I wonder if that's the way that one can sort of sneak in
That is one of the
a
ways.
book that they've read. I don't know whether it could work into something deeper.
It does. That does work. Bringing an animal into the room will work. Bringing a baby into the room and plopping it on their lap. I've done that one. Bringing them a cold beer. Reading to them from a book. Even though they're sitting there totally unresponsive, and all of a sudden the eyes pop open and say, hey, go back to that second paragraph. And then you're hooked, and you're in. And you're right, though. It's the small things sometimes that will open the biggest doors. Other thoughts? Yes, ma'am. State your name.
I'm Jane. You simply ask them what they want.
Very direct, simple question. What do you want? And what's the other one? What are you missing? What are you missing? Roger?
What happens when the person departing wants to depart in peacefully and the family members want to keep them alive?
You all know this is one of the most difficult things that we face in medicine. Who are we to say that you're to go or you're to stay? And it's heart-wrenching. You start way back at the beginning. You do the inventory and figure out, where you need to do your reconciling and who you're going to forgive and how you're going to forgive yourself. That opens a lot of that up, and so you can get around that without having to deal with it at the end. But there are times when it is difficult. Moss Linder told me a wonderful little joke, if you don't mind. The rabbi is dying in the cardiac care unit. The oxygen hose is on, hissing away, and his son comes in. And his son says, Dad, what can I do to help you? Take your damn foot off the oxygen hose. I'll give you one more joke because we need a little levity here. You know what Woody Allen said about dying? Did anybody here know?
No.
Don't mind dying, just don't want to be there when it happens. Yes, ma'am. State your name.
Martha, what changes have you seen in the public's attitude towards death in the 40-plus years that you've been practicing?
The attitude towards death is pretty much the same. How it's handled and how it's been presented and drawn out through medicine and through the media has changed a lot. One of the things that drove this was the durable power of attorney for healthcare and living will, which I hope all of you have given serious attention to and have in the hands of your loved ones and your doctors. And incidentally, these people from the CHT help me every day getting people to fill them out.
Thinking of a tattoo.
The tattoo works very well, yes. I would ask where you're going to put it, but that's all right. The tattoo would be great. Roger.
Yeah, there's some in the medical profession like yourself who say doctors aren't good at dealing with talking to families about dying.
It's not an easy thing to learn, number one, and you don't ever learn it. You experience it. You aren't really taught it, or you weren't when I was going to medical school, you weren't really taught it except by precept and example of those wonderful physicians who really knew how to do this. And I was blessed to have some incredible teachers. And the best teachers in my entire career are you. The patients, the people that I work with. You've taught me so much. So much. The profession itself now is making an attempt to do these kinds of conversations. They're bringing it up in medical schools now. The med students have to go out and help people do durable powers of attorney for healthcare and living wills. They have to go work with hospice teams. That's a great improvement right there. But the great improvements come from you folks who are interested enough to come to something like this. For you are the people who aren't going to proselytize, but you will speak freely about these things to friends and neighbors. And that's the best way to communicate something like this, I think. For the doctors who have trouble with it, come and talk to people who've done a lot of it, walk in their footsteps a little bit. Most doctors, I think, do a lot better job than they did in the past now, but we still have tons of things to learn, all of us. Other questions? Come on. Yes, ma'am. State your name.
Andrea, people always ask me what, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, I don't know the answer to the question, what is the difference between dying at home and coming to Grace Cottage's palliative care room? Why should they, under what circumstances should they come to Grace Cottage? Or another hospice?
Well, there's home hospice. There's hospice in hospital or in nursing homes or in assisted livings. And then there's dying on your own at home with family and friends around you. You know, your minister, you have a large clan that lets them help there. So there's a variety of ways of this arranging your death and where you're going to do it. The hospice program itself is a government-funded program, as you probably understand. And it has its own rules and its own physicians and its own caregivers. And the person's personal physician, their family physician or internist, whoever, have the right to add in to the process. But the process is actually legally under the control of this group of people. They are often understaffed and overworked. It is a very difficult job to do day in and day out. The burnout rate is high, even though they practice as much mindfulness training and teaching as they can. It gets really hard after you've done it day in and day out and day in and day out, and you don't see the newborns arriving. You know, you can't, you begin to lose sight of what's real in life. There's the in-hospital hospice, where hospice retains the right to come in and work with the nursing staff and the doctors in the hospital. That works very well. You have the people who want just hospitalists and hospice without the actual hospice program. The benefits of the hospice program, the federal one, is that they'll pay for your medications, and oftentimes they'll pay for devices and things that you need to help keep people comfortable in their home setting. I did a survey about a year ago of my patients, and I asked them, so where would you like to die? And most of them said, I don't want to go there. But the ones I got answers from, about 80% said they wanted to die at home, if they could. It is very difficult right now, in this economy, in this country, at this time, to churn up enough people who can really help you do the job so that you feel like you're giving those people everything they need, or as much as you can give them. Both people working, husband and wife. Often the elder children working. The community's full of people doing the same thing. Both parents working, kids working. You remember in the old days, when you walked out of the house, grandma was right across the street, and there was about 50 other grandmas around you, and there was lots of extra people around who could come in and help out. My Irish relatives, man, they feasted on that, literally. Or should I say drank on it, Bill. But, you know, we don't have that now. And I don't see that that's going to change dramatically. But we need to facilitate everyone who is willing to help out. Sorry. I didn't turn mine off. You've got to really facilitate things for the people who want to do it and want to try it. And even the ones who try it and feel they've been a failure, you got to support them. So you didn't fail, you did everything you could do. You can only do so much. There's only so much you can give. But that kind of support is now starting to rise up a little more, and I think that Claire and Bill and Deb can tell you that the communities are getting more and more interested in home death and in home care for the elderly, finding the extra people and the extra staff. It's going to be difficult. Economics are not good for this right at the moment. Perhaps it will improve. We don't know. But from your hearts and your wallets, I beg you to consider supporting groups that are doing this kind of work, because it is so needed and so important right now.
Just a quick question.
You ask a lot of questions.
You're not retiring, you're just retiring out of active medical practice, certainly. Going forward, no, the trend is that not many physicians like yourself are going into primary care. How would you, if you had the power to do it, change that whole paradigm?
Well, the first thing you do to change it is we start in the high schools. And we start recruiting young. We recruit our own. And we bring them up and we support them and we expose them to this kind of experience. And I've had the young kids be more insightful than I've ever been about patients sometimes when I've taken them around with me on some of these house calls and things. There's a great deal of learning that could be accomplished on the one-to-one with the generation that will be the physicians and nurses and caregivers of the next generation. We need to pump the money in there, and the doctors have to be willing to give them of themselves to these kinds of people. Fortunately, at Grace Cottage, we have a bunch of doctors and nurses and other caregivers who are more than willing to do this, and we see a lot of it. And it warms the cockles of my little heart to see it, because they're going to do it. They're going to go into medicine. They're going to go into nursing. They're going to go into radiology. They're going to go into hospice care. And they're going to do the job. But it's a long way away from Tipperary, ladies and gentlemen. We got a long way to go before we get to where we need to be in our own community, to have the resources on hand to meet every one of your needs, because every one of you is a deserving human being who should have that towards the end of your life and at the end of your life. Remember Ray's story. Surrounded by love. That bird didn't get there just because it was flying by and needed a new place to poop. It got there because something brought it there that's greater than us. Yes, ma'am.
Ingrid, people say they don't want to leave Vermont and establish residency in another state because of our physician-assisted suicide. I know we're not supposed to call it that, but can you speak about that?
It's no mystery to anyone here. Through the generations, back when man first cracked two rocks together and made the first poultice of something that was toxic, doctors, caregivers, shamans have used medicines to ease people out of life. There's no doubt about it. Read the history, look at the books, it's been there. I do not believe in the legislation of these things, but it was legislated. And it is now a law in Vermont that if you are determined to be terminally ill and have less than 6 months to live, and you are in pain that is not being controlled by that which the doctors can offer you, or you are suffering emotionally to such an extent that it cannot be relieved, the doctors, 2 doctors, visit with you, each separately, drawing their own conclusions. They then meet with you and the family and decide if they meet the criteria of the law, and in that case, one doctor writes the prescriptions for the medications, and then they have to wait 2 weeks and come back again before the prescriptions are filled, and then it has to be done by the patient himself or herself.
Oh, that's good.
Now, just to give you an idea of how the medical industrial complex has strayed from the path, those medicines used to cost about $27. I was told by Dr. Gertz the other day that it is now close to $3,000 for that small number of pills.
Oh, Jesus.
Doxycycline, old tetracycline, remember we all took for our zits? well, doxycycline used to be $3 a script. It's $300 in 1 year. Generic drug. There are things that need to be changed in this system, and we got to do it. You can't just sit back and let it happen. We got to do it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. When my dad passed, and I was there helping him with things, that he, at just the end, the last week and a half or so, Hospice would come to the house, but not even very much. I was just pretty much there. But he did get a prescription for morphine for pain because he had terminal cancer. And I don't know how much he was really aware of. He was pretty out of it by then, but he managed, supposedly by accident, to take all the morphine at once. And he went into a coma, and then 3 or 4 days later he was gone. I thought, it just occurred to me that when people are in pain with some terminal illness, they usually do get a prescription for morphine. That's common. And that's not expensive. And they can make up their own mind without going through ridiculous amount of blocks along the way. Is that something that works, or is this unique?
If you take a lot of morphine, you can kill yourself.
Okay.
But it takes an awful lot. And one of the side effects of taking a large amount of morphine is you vomit. And when that happens, you usually aspirate and you get a pneumonia. That'll kill you. But that's not a pleasant way to go. The drugs they use are the phenobarbital class of drugs that just put you into narcotic sleep, but to the extent that you stop breathing and you don't know it. You're deeply unconscious when your respiratory center fails. But you are correct, and there are people that have ended their lives with morphine. Mr. Cummings.
Do you believe that many people wait to die until they see a certain person?
A certain person. Is that what you said, person?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's part of the reconciliation. That's that little piece. If you haven't done your homework, the reconciliation sometimes doesn't come to your door, but when all of a sudden the son who has not spoken to you in 50 years appears at the bedside, I've seen people open their eyes and smile and die. They were hanging on and hanging on and hanging on. You know, the will is a mighty instrument. You know, it blows a big horn. Yeah, yeah. I have already outdone my time, but I'll take one last question.
Just kind of a question about you, what you're thinking about retirement, and if you got specific plans for your retirement.
Yes. I want to visit my grandkids and my kids and give my wife a husband.
That sounds great.
That's my plans. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.